So what we can see here is the skeleton of an Arricam studio, and what we did, we took direct drive torque motors for the movement and the shutter. One of them you can see here. On front you can see the PL mount, and from this side you can see the movement here and one of the sprockets. And outside of that we would have some noise insulation to the outer housing to reduce the noise level. And for the electronic communication between all these modules and microprocessor controlled devices, we chose the CAN bus system, which is also used in the automotive industry, to make sure that the communication between all these modules works properly.
And he came up with a mid-rib system, a complete mid-rib system where the mechanism, a mid-rib system is where the mechanism of the camera is completely suspended in a box.
We decided to make an inner skeleton with a noise insulation to the outer housing to reduce the noise level again. As you can see here, the PL mount, the aperture plate and the ground glass is mounted together in one piece. So whenever temperature is changing, the ground glass and the aperture plate is in the same distance to the lens.
My name's Chunky Richmond. I'm a focus puller. We're here in Arri Media in London, prepping a film called Alexander. We're taking 3 435s, 1 Movicam compact, 2 lightweight Arricams, 1 ST Arricam. Filters, I've got a massive filter package, which is probably somewhere equal to the rental package. We're taking 3 geared heads, 5 O'Connors, 2 Romford 2015s, 3 Lambda heads. I've ordered 600,000 feet for 7 weeks in Morocco. I'm taking 3 sets of ultra primes, one of which are an LDS set, 2 5-to-1s, 2 10-to-1s, 1 600 mils, 5 lens control systems. I am taking about 21 block Hollywood batteries and about 10 belt batteries Hollywood. We are using 5245, which is 50 daylight, 5246, we're using 5218 and 5279, both of which are 500 tungsten. And that's just for Morocco.
I'm Paul Crumper. We're in Orlando, Florida, shooting a Bright House Networks commercial with Sherry Belafonte.
Paul, can we go to the Optimo 24-290? We're a little too wide on this.
I'm George Schmidt. I'm the service manager at Arri, New York. I'm usually here to fix things that break, but today I'm here to show you some features of the Arricam system. This is the Arricam Studio body. This is how it would come from a rental house with nothing on it, and we're going to build it. First, we're going to install the viewing system with an IVS attached to it. The IVS and view system attaches with 3 screws. And next we're going to attach the magazine adapter. This version being the universal version where it allows you to top load and rear load at the same time. It's held in with 6 screws, and you'll notice on the unit itself it says lock first, these 2 screws, and then you can go to the other 4 screws in any order. Next, we're going to install the studio display. We remove this protective cover and then install the studio display with 1 screw. Next, we're going to attach the studio carry handle. Next, we're going to install the speed control box. You remove this panel, and then the speed control box has locating pins, and you push it forward to lock in place. You remove the panel for the lens data box the same way, and then you attach the lens data box in the locating pins and push backwards to lock in place. Next, we're going to install the Arricam. And the Arricam has a cover that gets removed with 1 screw. The Arricam unit itself has a cover for protection for storage purposes. We remove that with 1 screw. And then the Arricam module attaches to the camera with 1 single screw. Next, we're going to install the lens support rods. Now we're going to install the LDS lens, and you can notice that the lens has contact points and the lens mount itself has contact pins for the LDS transmission of information. And we're going to install the follow focus. It clips onto the rods. You engage the gear and then lock follow focus onto the rods. Next, we're going to attach the map box. This map box has a lens data display attached to it, so we're going to plug that in to the connection on the studio readout. Next, we're going to attach the video monitor. There are little accessory shoes onto the camera where you can mount it in a variety of places. And then you lock it down on the accessory shoe. And then we're going to plug in the video monitor onto the IVS unit itself. Next, we're going to plug in power to the camera. Make sure the switch is on the off position. Plug in power, and then turn on the on switch.
We had an instant a long time ago where a director had a kaleidoscope made by an optical firm, by a spectacle maker, for a party sequence, and he just put it in front of the lens mount. And just shone light in it and said this is the party effect that he was going to blend into his film. And I still believe you could put a Coca-Cola bottle backwards and shine light into it and make a picture. You make an image, and that image may be right for your piece of the movie. You know, it's an original piece of photography done with a simple Coca-Cola bottle. So, and that's why one of the passions I have is lenses.
Hi, my name's Ben Wilson, I'm a focus puller, and I'm currently testing for Production Alexander, which we'll be shooting up for the rest of this year, through till Christmas. And we're at Arri Media with various cameras, 7 cameras on this job. Much of my sort of time this week has been running through all the lenses. We've got sort of 3 main camera packages of lenses, primes, zooms, etc., which we're trying to sort of shoot each lens against the chart behind me, just to sort of check out resolution on each lens at various distances. And then again, we'll shoot various tests outside again, just to see that everything's coming up sharp, everything's on scale, and so on. Behind the camera here, we've got a sharpness indicator chart, which is it's got a very finely printed chart, which just sort of helps you just sort of establish that exact point of focus, and then check the barrel to see if it is where you want it to be. And then we've got a harp test chart here, which is useful just to see your depth of field, just to see where your sharpness is, and just how the lens is behaving as it falls off. Some lenses fall off quite sharply, and others sort of go off gently. And it's just quite a good way of helping you learn that. Often I'll shoot these charts, but with people alongside them as well, just to sort of try and establish that sort of point of focus. But it does sort of just help you be a bit more confident with each lens as you're on a production, that it's doing what you want it to do with various stops that you could be given.
Well, my name's Simon Finney, we're at Leavesden Studios, and I'm camera operator on Harry Potter 3.
My name is Robert Binnell. I'm the first AC on Harry Potter 3.
Alfonso Cuarón, that is the director, loves super wide angle lenses. And we're shooting 14, this sequence where we are now, we shot the whole thing, that's called the Shrieking Shadow, on a 14mm lens.
Sometimes you need to be out of light or eye lines, so we can swing the eyepiece from one side to the other.
Moving cameras, there's not much room to get stuff in, so the operator, even though he's pretty skinny, you know, we often have to switch him over the other side and he operates with his other eye.
On this job in particular, we've had it on the other side quite often for lighting purposes, in order not to cast shadows, and also sometimes just for the physical ease of the operating. It's handier to be on the dumb side, and it is quite a useful facility to have, and also the ability to get your head closer and further away from the body of the camera can be quite handy at times because of the situations you're in, either physically small sets or somewhere you've got to get an actor behind you there to give them the room for the eye line and that sort of thing.
It's often difficult for us to be on this side looking through, or vice versa. So what's good about this camera is you can swing from one side to the other very easily.
Well, the viewing system on the Arricam is pretty effective with a 3 lengths of viewfinder. I actually try and use the short finder as much as possible, because I just find it personally better to be closer to the camera, and I kind of, rather than be, certainly with a long finder, you're stuck right back here, which is something I find a bit awkward. I've used the intermediate finder a fair amount, and I think I prefer the look through on the intermediate. Generally, it seems a little crisper to me, although generally speaking, the quality is very good. And with the telescopic facility on the extension viewfinder, on the odd occasions I have used it, you can actually manipulate the size of image in the finder, because sometimes it's better to have it a bit further away, because if it's too close to you, it's sort of a bit in your face and a little confusing at times, but because you have to move your eye quite a long way to scan the edges. Although on occasion that can be quite useful to have a larger image in the finder.
My name is Tom Lappin, and I am the first assistant cameraman on the untitled Nancy Myers project. We're shooting here in East Hampton, New York. We're doing sort of the exterior portion of our film.
My name's Dominic Aloisi. I'm the A-camera second AC on The Missing.
We use the wireless focus a lot on this show. It's very helpful for when I want to get away from the camera, you get a little better perspective for long lens stuff, or when the dolly's going so fast that you know, there's a weight issue.
I use the wireless lens control system a lot, which is a system of motors that I can attach to the side of the camera and be elsewhere around the room or the set and still focus the lens independently.
We can just do it really quickly We can just, literally, you plug the motor in, you throw the motor on, you hit calibrate, and you're pretty much ready to go. It's great for us because, a lot of times we'll do a dolly shot and the shot will change where the camera ends up in a place where I can't stay next to it. And I don't like to ride the dolly because it's just something I don't like to do.
Often the way sets can be lit, access to cameras, sometimes it works out easier to be separate of the camera.
I like to get away and you get a nice perspective on the camera and the talent. Sometimes if you've got a long lens where you're over a piece of furniture or something and at the last minute you want to throw on the wireless so you can get away and get a better perspective, it's a really quick and easy thing to do.
We pre-calibrated all the discs at prep, and so when it came time to change lenses, all we had to do was basically slap the disc on, press calibrate on the unit, and we were completely dialed in. All of the, the painstaking time it takes to mark each of the discs or to tape up and mark is gone.
The LDS is the lens data system, and it basically allows the assistant to have sort of a digital display of his depth of field. So all the lens information is transferred through the camera to a little display that gives you an instantaneous readout of your depth of field, which is a nice thing to have.
The LVS lenses are interesting, especially for assistants, because they have a readout of the stop, the focal length, the depth of field, all that.
We have the LDS VP2 on here, and this allows us to use the LDS box, which calculates immediately your depth of field based on your stop and your millimeter. And I like it because it's just extremely accurate. I mean, I have a little piece of ND gel on here, so I really just accentuate the footage scale because it's just so clear and so it's so exact. I know exactly what 15 feet 9 inches is. I know what 22 feet 6 inches is. So it just takes a lot of the guesswork out of it for me, and allows me to sort of on the fly determine what my depth of field is and how maybe I can roll it back and hold that person in the background a little bit, and sort of minimize on running to get the Kelly wheel out to see what our depth of field is. It's a nice tool. It's something that it's nice to have to reference as you go.
I have to say in the beginning that I'm not a very technical cameraman. I'm not somebody who knows everything about the technique and is very into that. I'm using cameras basically like a painter uses like the brush. So if you ask me about technical things, I know all these things, but I'm not really into these things too much. What fascinates me about the new Arricam was that it has a couple of features that I really liked.
Michael's a big fan of the variable primes. They're pretty much our primary lenses. We use them for 80% of the shots. Anything where it's a studio camera, a traditional dolly shot, or anything on a head, we use the VPs. And they're great because you've got a nice range. You've got the 16 to 30, which is a great wide lens to a nice medium lens, and then you've got the 29 to 60 and the 55 to 105. So it's great. It's like having a whole set of primes in 3 lenses, and you've got the speed and the ability to make little adjustments that can save a take, or it's really, really helpful.
My name is Thomas Greiser. I'm technical rep from Arri Inc., based out of New York, and I would like to show you a little bit about our wireless lens control system. What we have here is a wireless focus unit, which is attached to the lens data display using the wireless extension bracket. And to switch the unit on, you have to make sure the camera is switched on first. Then you also have to make sure you use the same channel setting as it is set on the camera itself. To switch it back on, you have a little on button on the top of the unit. It's indicated by a green light that it's ready, and the green RF light indicates that there is communication between both units. After you did that, you have to press the calibration button. So both motors attached to the lens, looking for the stop position of the lens. You can use up to 3 wireless main units on the camera, which can be helpful, for example, to split up the task of remote focus, iris, and speed ramp. So after the calibration is done, the lens data display shows you basically all the lens settings, including camera status, like the set frame per second, the set shutter angle, the exposed film, the raw stock, and the battery voltage. It also indicates by a little bar, as well as in written numbers, your depth of field, which is calculated automatically in the lens data display. On the bottom it shows you what kind of lens you have on there and the T-stop. The wireless focus unit has several little buttons and switches. It has a focus wheel. It has in the middle a little selector switch where you can choose between the iris and the focus, depending if you want to use the wheel or the little slide button on the side for iris or for focus or the opposite. On the left hand side you have a little button where you can set the actual angle you want to use on the lens itself. It's the same for the focus as well. And you're also going to be able to program the actual range you want to use on the wheel itself. By doing that, you just press and hold the lens button until it starts blinking, and you move from one position of the iris to the end position which is desired and release it. And the same is true for the focus. You first set your first start of the focus point, you press and hold the lens button, go to your second focus position and release. That means your focus knob only controls the angles which you just set on the camera. Going over to the left side of the lens data display, we have several switches and buttons. The top one switches unit on and off. The middle one, you can choose between the lens you have connected to the camera. Either it's a metric system or it's a feed system, or you let, if you set it to lens, the unit decide automatically which kind of lens is attached to it. You have a set button and a delete button, and two brightness buttons for the brightness of a display, and another menu button to go into further menus for settings on the lens data display. With the set and the delete button, you're going to be able to set different marks, and you can erase marks, you can erase all the marks, and you're also going to be able to switch the numbering around or renumber the marks you set before. So you go to 8 feet in this instance, press the set button, and it puts a labeled number 2 on it. Move to the next mark and press set, and you have number 3. If you press and hold the delete button, you're going to delete all the set marks at once. What we have here is a wireless focus unit 1 attached to the wireless main unit 1. Compared to the wireless focus unit 3, it shares basically the same features. What you can do is attach the lens data display directly to the unit, but all the other setup and buttons are basically the same, and I would like to go over them. So in order to switch the unit on, you have on the top of the main unit an on button and also the RF selector channel, which again you have to make sure it's the same channel like on the camera itself. You basically press the button to switch the unit on. After the unit is on, the RF is steady green. You press the calibration button. If the calibration light turns off, that means the lens system is calibrated in the correct way, and the green radio LED lights up. On the front of the wireless focus unit, you have a lens button, a knob button, and another lens button for the iris. Again, make sure the little selector knob button is in the top position to assign the focus function to the wheel and the iris function to the slide knob. To adjust the limitation of the lens, you go to your first position, in this instance 4 feet. You press and hold the lens button, go like 10 feet, remove it, and now the whole movement is limited between 4 and 10 feet. In order to use the whole range, we have to have a complete turn of the knob, and in order to offset that, we can program the range, the usable range of the wheel itself by pressing and holding the knob button, just turning the desired range we want to use, and release it again. Now we can adjust the lens between 4 and 10 feet by just using the little range of the knob. It's sort of an electronic gear ratio setting. The way we had the lens data display set up before, mounted to the rods, is not the way you want to see it in the field. Usually it is mounted, as you can see here, with an L-shaped bracket onto the mat box.
Andrew Rowland, who is the Steadicam operator and the A camera operator, was very happy because the cameras are not too heavy for Steadicam and not too heavy for handheld either.
I operate the camera, I also operate the Steadicam.
With the one body, you can do your Steadicam, you can do your high speed up to 60 frames, you can do your handheld, you can do your studio work.
My basic resume was able to lift heavy boxes and run fast.
So basically this is the studio camera, the studio body, and we basically just remove the studio top, put on the lightweight top. It's a standard 400-foot studio mag, ultra prime lens, and the Arri clip-on matte box, and that's pretty much it. Ready to go.
We use the standard 400-foot magazines. We have the 100% video tap on the top, and we're using the ultra primes with a small clip-on matte box. So this whole system is a nice little short, compact system. The great thing with doing handheld, you can extend the eyepiece in and out, and so you can get it so ergonomically it sits on your shoulder, and you have the eyepiece at a really nice position.
The camera comes with 3 different adapters. You can get a top adapter, or the standard rear mount, which is straight up and down, or the adapter 2, which has a top mount and a 30-degree angle. So we normally use the adapter 2, but for Steadicam we just have the standard rear mount adapter.
So in handheld mode, we use the little 30-degree angle adapter on the back here, and it comes back on a slight angle like this, and again it just sits on your shoulder nicely, and you have a nice profile. The 100% video tap is a much smaller unit and sits in the center part of the camera, and you don't have the weight of the studio mode. It has a lot to do with balance. With the viewfinder sticking off here to the left, it's a lot of extra weight that you add to the camera. Makes it much more top heavy and hangs to the left a lot. But by keeping it small and compact in the center, this camera flies a lot better.
So we're going to switch over the ST studio body to Steadicam. I like to keep everything in one case, like I said earlier, and the case is big enough to accept the studio top, so I can just put everything whatever I take off will also fit back in the same case, so that everything's just always in one box. So it's pretty simple. You just remove accessory handles, and then it's just 3 screws on top. So it's basically just those 3 screws, and that comes right off. Like that. And then we have our 100% top, which is a light studio top with the 100% video, which is kind of nice. Yeah, we do, I guess, 2 or 3 days a week of Steadicam. And it's nice because then when we have B camera, we can just switch it over and use it as a second camera. So you don't have to carry a third body, a third lightweight body, which is kind of nice. Save a little money. This is the rear mount adapter, so it just keeps the magazine straight up and down. So we can use regular 400-foot magazines. We don't have to use lightweight mags. It's the 100% top. It just mounts with 3 screws, 2 in the front, 1 in the back. The low mode bracket attaches with 4 points. And it also has the bracket to hold our focus and iris motors. And now all we need to do is remove the base plate and put on the Steadicam plate, and then we're ready to mount it up. It's pretty simple.
Hi, I'm Alistair Ray. I'm the Steadicam B camera operator. We're here at Leavesden Studios shooting Harry Potter in North London. This is the Steadicam, the Arricam light that we're using on Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. It's the 100% video top, which is giving us the good quality picture, and the Steadicam, the Arricam Steadicam magazine, which displaces the film in a way which doesn't change the forward to back balance, because what happens with the Steadicam is like balancing a plate top of a stick. It just stays there because it's perfectly balanced. If the film was to change as it went through the thing would tip forward like this and stop working. What's helpful on Steadicam most significantly for me with this Arricam light is the quality of the video picture, because you don't actually look through the camera. I'm having to try and judge the frame from a television monitor. so the quality of the video picture is very important. It balances very nicely in high mode, which it's set up in at the moment, and also in low mode when we turn the camera upside down, spin the whole thing upside down like this. And then when I adjust the bottom weight, I'm left with a nice amount of room to get my hand in here where you operate the camera in low mode. We used this to get some very low shots as he was being dragged along the grass. So with the camera in this mode, you get this kind of range of heights here.
This is the Arricam Lite with a universal light finder and a light IVS video assist. What we're going to do is we're going to set the camera up for Steadicam use. Most of the accessories you see here in front of me can be mounted to the camera using a 3mm Allen key. This one comes with the camera. I prefer to use a T-handle one, makes it a little easier to tighten screws. We're going to remove the viewfinder and the IVS to mount the universal low motor bracket for Steadicam use. To remove the video, you have 2 Allen screws at the top. Using a 3mm Allen key, you remove the 2 screws. And then the video assist will lift off the camera. We're going to remove the viewfinder, and to remove the viewfinder, there's 3 screws. You have the first screw right here. That's great. Then we have another screw off to this side. And then there's a screw towards the back of the viewfinder. And as you're unscrewing this, you want to keep your hand on the viewing system so it doesn't fall off the camera. And then that comes off. This is the 100% video top, and we're going to remove the covers here to mount the video assist and then mount it onto the camera. This cover comes off, and then this mounts onto the camera. This uses the same 3 screws that the viewfinder uses. Then we're going to mount the low mode bracket for the light camera. And it attaches with 3 screws. Then we can install the video assist back onto the camera. Then we'll install the side rails for the low mode support. And that's held in with 2 screws. And this is pinned in place so it's easy to locate. And just tighten 2 screws down in place. And then we'll mount the other side. You just turn the 2 screws. And then finally, we can mount the Steadicam plate back onto the top of the camera. Then we're going to mount the support rods onto the camera. And they have 2 locating pins and a single screw that holds it onto the 100% video top. Once the support rods are mounted to the camera, you'll see that it has a studio and light selection. Depending on which camera it's mounted to, you set it to that particular camera. It's held in place by a single screw, and you loosen that screw with a 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench. And then you just, in this case for the light camera, raise the unit and then tighten the screw. Like a jug. This is the camera left side of the Arricam Studio. This is the new display that comes with the Arricam. What you'll have here is a run button that starts the camera. In the run mode, you'll see that it shows the frames per second running, and you'll see actual footage being shot. On the bottom, you have a reset button now. What you can do is reset the actual exposed film. When you push and hold that for a few seconds, it will reset to 0. On the opposite side, you have a button that says raw stock. What that is the footage remaining in the magazine. And when you push and hold that, it will tell you what the footage remaining in the magazine is. On the top here, you have a phase button. And when you push and hold the phase button, the camera will phase the movement at 1 frame per second. And it also indicates the battery voltage in the camera. The other blue buttons are non-functional at this point, unless you press you see indicated here, it says unlock. And that is a button that must be held at the same time as pushing the blue buttons to change any of the settings. That's installed as a safety feature so nothing gets offset by accident. To change the shutter angles, as you can see here, it's at 180 degrees. You would push and hold the unlock button and then press the blue button, and you can phase through the different shutter angle settings that are preset in the camera, all the way down to 11.2 degrees. And then it will return back to 180. The other 4 blue buttons will change your frames per second. Again, you have to hold the unlock button, and then you can change your frames per second by pushing the up and down buttons. So you can run the camera up to 24, or you can change it all the way to 60. It would automatically default to 60 when it gets there. So you don't have to push the second digits for that. And then return it back to the normal 24 running. You scroll through until you have your 24 frames per second. It also has a brightness button. What the brightness button does is changes the intensity of the LEDs in the display. You have 3 settings for the brightness. You have a low, medium, and high brightness.
Hi, I'm Chris Dale. I'm the central loader on Harry Potter 3.
My name is Angela Belicio. I am a loader.
My name's Will Humphries. I'm the clap loader on Alexander.
We've got the three studios, the A, B and the D camera. The D camera is sort of a standby that we can pre-rig onto cranes, and then we've got the C camera is the light version for handheld, and the Steadicam.
We are in the Hamptons currently for 3 weeks, so I'm part of the New York unit of that.
We've got about 360,000 feet of 4.6, and then we're also using 5245, about 160,000 feet.
If you put all the units together, we've got the main unit, second unit, we have a DVD unit that's really quite large. If you put it all together, you're on to about just over 1 million feet, I'd say.
We're up to about 700, we've shot about 750,000 feet. We've shot probably about 200,000 feet in handheld mode, and we've shot about 250,000 feet in Steadicam mode.
Yes, I do hear I'm going to have a lot of film to load. I was told it's going to be more like 20,000 feet a day or something lovely like that. So I will have lots of experience with these mags by the end.
We should be charging by the foot for sure.
It's 1,000 foot Arricam studio magazine.
Arricam mags are very simple to load, very similar to the movie cam mags.
That's the feed up. That's the feed side. That's the exposed side. It's a regulation sort of 9p scenario. So you'd lace it through there, through the throat, back up that side, whereas the Panavision will be that side. The main difference is the Arricam magazine will then go around that side. It's been designed, it's really quite simple, so it can be done fairly quickly, which is a bit of a key, really. This just flips open, and it's got a hinge on the side. So it's literally, you plonk it down in front of you, you get your can ready to put it into, and you can get your new film ready as well. Open it up, unload it, bosh, in between your legs, so you don't get confused. Pop out the waste, put it on, and then put your new film in. You can do it within 2.5, 3 minutes. The first thing to do first, rather than, you don't want to get mixed up, as soon as it comes out, put it in between your legs, and then you know that the most important thing, the exposed, is in between your legs. Can't go anywhere, can't go wrong. If you get an itch, it's tough. So on the other side of the magazine, we've got the digital readout. This is the footage that you've got left. Personally, I set it to, well, everyone really sets it to 990 feet rather than 1,000 feet, just to give yourself 10 feet leeway. Myself though, one criticism I do have of these magazines is that the reset, the scenario you have to go through to reset each time. They have the two little buttons inside here. You can't press it with your finger, you've got to get your pen out, and you've got to hold it for 3 seconds. So I designed a little system with just the top of an aerosol. These came off a can of WD-40 with a bit of Velcro around it. About a week into the film, I just got so fed up with having to do it every time with the pen off my penknife that I just made that, put a bit of Velcro around it, so each time I just reset it and then plonk it on another bit of Velcro there. That stays with the magazine. These are for sale, £2.50 from myself each.
We're going to load a 1,000-foot magazine. You just open the covers, push the core release buttons down. You center the film over the core, and you put it down and listen for 2 clicks. And then you rotate the platter until you hear a 3rd click. The 3rd click is the locating pin engaging in the core of the film itself. And then you feed the film down through the throat. Then you put the film on the take-up core, and you have the notch facing backwards, and you wrap the film around the core approximately 6 times. You put the core on the spindle, listen for the 3 clicks, and then close the cover. And you're ready to shoot.
I am holding a 400-foot lightweight Arricam mag. It's different than the studio mag because it has a longer throat. I'm holding this one up specifically because it's slightly harder to load because of this little extra doohickey on the side, which has a tendency to catch film if you have put it on the core and that's not completely flat. It'll hook on here and make a loud noise and scratch, and then the first says, "Angela, something's wrong with the mag," and then, yeah.
We're going to load a 400-foot shoulder magazine now. You open the cover, and normally when you open the cover, you'll see that the take-up side is moved over to the left. That's usually from unloading the magazine. So what we're going to do is we're going to push the spindle to the right, push both core release buttons, and then we're going to take our film feed it through the throat. With this type of magazine, you don't put the film on the spindle itself, you leave it off to the side on a can of film. It just makes it easier to feed through the throat because there's not enough room with this magazine to get your hand in there to feed through the throat. Now we're going to take the film, we're going to put it on the spindle, listen for 2 clicks, and then rotate the spindle until the locating pin locks into the core. And then we're going to feed the film into the take-up side. And you're going to take your core with the slot to the back side, and you're going to wrap the film around the core 6 times. And then we're going to put the core on the spindle, listen for the 2 clicks, and then rotate it until the locating pin locks on the spindle. Then we can close the cover and lock the cover. When loading the film onto the spindle, the locating pin for the core should not be in line with the notch on the film core itself. If you do that, when you push it down, you will not hear the 2 clicks on the spindle, and the core will not lock onto the spindle. Next, we're going to attach the magazine onto the camera. Remove the throat cover. Open the door to the camera body. Open the sprocket guides and move the camera movement to the back position. Feed the film down through the throat of the camera, making sure that it's not pinched when you engage the lock. Feed the film into the sprockets. And once the film is engaged with the sprocket teeth, you can close the loop guides. Then turn the movement until the registration pins stick out slightly. Move the movement to the front position, and then you can move the film with your finger on the bottom slightly until it engages with the registration pin. Once the movement is closed, you align the dot to the loop setting, and then you can adjust your loops by pushing in and turning the sprockets until they line up with the white marks on top and bottom of the camera. Make sure your buckle trips are reset, and then you can just manually inch the movement and then press the phase button to make sure that everything is engaged correctly. And then you can close the door and you are ready to shoot. Here's the instant replay. Make sure there's enough film coming out of the throat so it fits nicely in the chamber. Thread the film through the top and bottom sprocket rollers. Close the sprocket guides, bottom and top. Adjust the loop as needed. There are a number of ways to close the movement. The factory recommends turning the inching knob to 12 o'clock. Position the film perfs onto the transport claws by gently pulling down on the film while closing the movement. Adjust the loop size. Check the buckle trip. Inch the movement. Phase it. Run a few feet.
What I'm also fascinated about, and that is, I think, the future of film, as long as we shoot film, is the 3-perf, the possibility to change the system very quick from 4-perf into 3-perf, because that saves about 25% of film.
The Arricams, the studio and the light both are capable of go 3 perforation. Now, virtually all television today is shot 3 perforation. TV series, TV movies, everything. They save 25% on film stock and the developing of the film stock. It doesn't cost them anything to do it. The image is slightly smaller on the camera original, but for the television, it's still very good. It's still 340% larger than 16 millimeter. Now, with the new digital intermediates, it makes total sense for people to shoot this for the feature, for the big screen, in certain projects. To change the camera to 3 perforation, you exchange the movement. The movement in here, this camera now is 4 perforation. You remove the movement, but in a 3 perforation movement, you use a different aperture plate, change the ground glass, and then there's a switch inside the camera that we turn that allows the footage counter to read properly. It takes a technician, I would say, half a day to do it. You could do the physical change in a little bit, but you need to really fine tune it and adjust it so it runs nice and silent.
We're shooting 235, Super 35.
Well, we have this Super 35 and Super 166, top and bottom. I mean, the initial brief was to protect that as much as possible, which we try and do. There are occasions when, because of the nature of the composition of the shot, and you're trying to use as much of the sets as possible, that we've had to sacrifice the area outside 235. Although there are other mechanisms for being able to squeeze that down to a 166 format in order for the DVDs to be processed properly. But generally speaking, we do try and protect the whole area. And also with a film like this, there's a fair amount of visual effects and blue screen where you do try and protect full aperture if you can as well, to give the VFX guys a chance to sort of manipulate the frame a little more handily.
To remove the ground glass, it's a good idea to clear the mirror shutter to avoid hitting or scratching it. For this demo, we'll leave it in the viewing position. Most Arricam ground glasses are removed with 3mm threaded tool. There are a number of tools out there. The new tool has a 3mm thread on one end and has a 1.5mm hex drive on the other end to adjust the video or Arriglow. The screw hole on the ground glass is right there. The tool screws right into that hole. You screw it in all the way, and then you pull the ground glass out, and then you can exchange ground glasses or remove a ground glass for cleaning purposes, and then you can reinstall it the same way, and then unscrew the tool, and you've changed your ground glass.
Well, we just did a speed ramp from 3 frames a second to 24 frames a second, which is one of the reasons that we like to use the Arricam ST. It has a great range of speeds, and it's very simple to go from 1 to 60 at the flick of a switch.
Speed box slots into here, and it enables us to do speed ramps for slowing up or speeding up action.
This is the camera right side. If you want to do a speed ramp with this camera, you need to install a speed control box. To do that, you have to remove a panel off the camera and attach the speed control box. Speed control box locks into place. Now, once the speed control box is on, you turn power onto the camera. And now to do a speed ramp, you have a starting speed, a speed duration for the ramp, and a finishing speed. To change the speeds, for instance, if we want to do a speed ramp from 24 to 60 frames per second, you have little push buttons that indicate plus and minus to change the speed up and down. And in this case, the camera's set to 22 frames per second. To go to 24 frames per second, we push the bottom button, and each time you push it will change 1 frame per second. So we have 24 frames per second, and in this case, it's 1.3 seconds to do the speed ramp, and the finishing speed is 60 frames per second. The camera will tell you if there's a fault. For instance, if the speed to do the speed ramp is too fast, the camera will indicate that by a flashing light. So if the time frame is too fast, the camera will tell you that it cannot do this speed ramp. What you do is you go by tenths of a frame increments until the light goes out, and that's the fastest the camera can do that speed ramp. Also, with the frame rates, if the camera frame rate is too high for the camera, it'll tell you that the frame rate is not capable of reaching this frame rate. So you go down to a frame rate until the light goes off, and then the camera will run that frame. To activate the speed ramp, what you would do is you would press the run button, and once the camera runs and reaches speed, to activate this actual speed ramp, you press the ramp button, and it will run through the ramp. If you hit the ramp button again, it will do the ramp in reverse. The camera will continue to run until you hit the run button again to stop the camera. So you start the camera with the run button. The camera will run at its starting position now, 24 frames per second. When you hit the ramp button, the ramp will actually be activated, and the camera will ramp to 60 frames per second in that specified amount of time. If you hit the ramp again, the camera will go back to its original starting frame rate, but still continue to run. To stop the camera, you hit the run button again, and the camera will stop running. To find out what the minimum ramp time can be for this camera, in the standby mode, what you can do is press the ramp button, and in the display, it'll tell you what the minimum ramp time would be. Also, in this mode, you have a camera compensation here. What this can do is when it does the speed ramp, it can compensate with either iris or shutter. In the iris setting, it requires a lens control motor attached to the iris of the lens, and when the speed ramp is activated, it will automatically compensate the iris on the lens to give you constant exposure throughout the speed ramp. In the shutter setting, what the camera will do is actually change the shutter angle as the speed ramp occurs to keep the constant exposure throughout the speed ramp. The difference between the two is in iris compensation, you'll get a constant exposure, but you'll have a depth of field change. In the shutter setting, you'll have a constant exposure with no depth of field change. So now the camera is set for shutter compensation, and you'll notice in the display that the shutter angle automatically sets to 72 degrees. This automatically calculates knowing what the starting and finishing frames per second are. So now when you activate the camera run button and activate the ramp, you'll see that the ramp will take place and the shutter angle will change to compensate for exposure. With compensation set to the off position, you'll notice that the shutter angle automatically defaults to 180 degrees. Now when the camera runs and you activate the ramp, you'll notice that the ramp will change speeds, but the shutter angle will not change any angles. So exposure will change as the ramp occurs. And chances are the exposure will look bad with this effect.
You need to interview Chunky, he'll tell you all about this.
Special thing about this is it's a wireless ramp, which when these cameras first came out, if you were ramping a lot, you always had to do it with an umbilical cord. And it's a godsend, basically, because a lot of the time you'd always want to ramp on the Steadicam, and most Steadicam operators never want a cord coming off in any way, shape or form. So it's great to have this. You can compensate a little bit on the shutter or a little bit on the iris and make it up the other way. You can do 50-50, and for the first time ever, you can do a ramp, compensate on the shutter, and not actually have to end up on 180 degrees. If you choose to compensate on the iris, you will lose or gain depth of field. If you compensate on the shutter, your image will either become sharper or stuttered, not stuttered, strobing. For instance, if you wanted to have a scene where there was an explosion in it and you wanted to ramp into an explosion, someone flying through the air or debris flying through the air, then yes, you probably want to do a ramp on the shutter so you can actually see bits of debris flying through the air. For more conventional use, an iris stop ramp is probably the best way to go.